that are here, teachers, administrators, just friends of us, of all of us that are here. I want to welcome you to our workshop this morning, a webinar. I want you to know this is part one of a two-part one. So I think that we'll start moving here. It says, welcome to the box. And you have to start thinking, what box are you in? Why are we in a box anyway? We talk about this, but we're not really sure why we're in a box. So we're going to go on with this, and we're going to be looking at several things. We'll be looking, this is my name and my email, if any of you need to reach me. We're going to look at change theory, time management, learning languages, and reality. Okay, the reality of what's happening in education is very important, and I think we need to look at that. And it's quite important that we do. So I'm glad I can see you, and good afternoon, everybody, wherever you are. I happen to be in Laredo, Texas, in the United States, so that's a long ways away, and I'm at 7 o'clock in the morning, while all of you are in the afternoon at 4 or other times. Okay, welcome to the box. And we're going to look at this topic called the box, and start asking ourselves, what is the box? And who is in the box? Who's in it? Who's stuck in a box? Maybe some of you are and don't even realize it. And you have to start thinking, what shape is your box in? Is it a plain old ordinary box or a nice fancy one, decorated one? But when we're stuck in a box, we can't really be ourselves. So you have to start thinking, why are you in the box? Number one. And start thinking about how you can make your own changes. What keeps you in the box? And there's many, many reasons. If you could participate, if we were in real life, I would be asking you these questions. But many teachers have told me their lifestyle or their ingrained beliefs, things they really believe deep down inside, afraid to change, fear of failure, their worldview. Maybe their family keeps them in a box, or their values, or previous experiences. Sometimes people have not had very good experiences when they speak their mind and they get into trouble. And then, well, they just stay inside the box. Maybe they feel safe inside the box. Nobody's going to bother them. They won't cause any problems. And many, many people stay in the box because they're simply complacent. They just stay and accept the minimum. They don't want to make any waves. They don't want to make any problems. So they shut their mouths and just do their job as little as they can. Now, this guy is complacent. He says, I'm okay. He's okay. He's on his hammock. He's got the palm trees over here. He's nice and friendly. But he's probably not the most ambitious person in the world. So we're going to look and see what keeps people in the box and what happens. And I'm going to ask you, and I wish you could answer me, but I know you can't. Why did dinosaurs become extinct? Think about that. Not just because a meteorite or an asteroid or something hit the Earth down by the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico 65 million years ago. That's not why they became extinct. Extinct because all of life did not end then. The dinosaurs weren't killed immediately. The sky was black with dust and dirt and debris for over 5 years. And with no sun, what doesn't grow? You're right, plants. And with no plants, what happens to the plant eaters? Good. And what happens to the meat eaters when the plant eaters are all dead? This is what happened to the dinosaurs because they did not change. They didn't try to adjust, nor did they do things differently. Now, you might be thinking maybe they don't have any choice, but the fact is, all of life was not killed off at that time, 65 million years ago. Some animals, insects like cockroaches, they stayed, they survived, they learned how to change, how to see things differently. And so sometimes when I work with people who won't change and they're very rigid, I call them a dinosaur. Maybe I shouldn't, but I do. Okay, don't worry about thinking outside the box. Okay, don't worry about being outside the box. Don't be afraid. Don't be complacent, because actually there is no box unless you make it yourself. You keep yourself inside a box. So this man, he's out. He says, okay, I'm out of the box. Now what? Well, what happens is other people start saying, hey, get back in that box. Start thinking like the rest of us. They don't want other people to be different. And when you're different, sometimes people look at you like you're strange. These over here are the dinosaurs. These over here are the survivors. These are the people who will make things happen. Thinking outside the box is about dispensing with constraints, says Mike Storm. Or thinking outside the box is about being autonomous. In many jobs, we can't be autonomous. In teaching, it's very difficult to be autonomous nowadays. In the old days, when I say old days, I started teaching maybe before most of you were born. I started teaching in 1964. I was 21 years old, right out of college, my first degree, my bachelor's degree in history. And I didn't know what I was going to do with history. So I said, well, I guess I'll be a teacher. And back in those days, we weren't given prescribed curriculum. We were given subjects to teach. I taught elementary school. I taught second grade was my first job. Second grade of primary, 7, 8-year-old kids. And I was given a list of topics to cover, but I could do them any way I wanted, with a textbook or without a textbook. A lot more freedom, and I think a lot more quality, depending, of course, on the teacher. Some things are more easily said than done. We say we want change. We all say it. We say, yeah, I want change. And we demand improvement. I want improvement in my school, in the curriculum, in my director, in myself, in my school, in my classroom. And yet nothing happens. And the question is why? Why don't things happen? Why don't they happen? We don't know why things don't happen, but there's a lot of reasons why, which I think we have to start looking at and saying, okay, why these things don't happen. They just don't. So we go on. Okay, so we move on to our next slide, except my thing seems to not want to move, but I will move it. I'm going to stay with share and move some of these things because the thing here just doesn't seem to want to move, but that's okay because I can make it move. And so I will somehow get out of this and go over here and go back to the slide that I want, because this one came in extra. This is causing me a little bit of, I'm going to escape for a second here. And so we can look and say, okay, why aren't things changing? What's happening? What's happening here? Why are things not changing? And so what we have to do is start looking at the whole idea of, and I'm going to go down here and get out of this so that I can get this doesn't seem to want to work. So I'm going to try to get rid of some things. Strange. There it is. Now I've got it working again. Okay, so we have to say, why do these things happen? What road am I going to take? What am I going to do as a teacher? I need a job. I have to earn money. Doesn't pay that much, but most of us who are in teaching really like to teach. And you say, what road will I take? What am I going to do with my life? And so we start looking at some of the people who have looked at this kind of thing. And we look at over here, we look at this one. And we say, okay, what happened here? What happened? This is a famous part of a famous poem. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. Now, that's an excerpt from The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. It's very interesting to think about if we had taken a different road, what our life might be like. Or if we take a different road right now while we are a teacher, while we're an administrator. So what am I going to do? I'm out of the box now. Okay, I'm out of the box. What am I going to do? I'm not going to be complacent. And this is a heavy load. What do I need to know? What do you think somebody needs to know when they get out of the box and they have a heavy load of things to do? They have to know how to change. Many people don't know how to change. They want to change, but they're not sure. And so we say to ourselves, okay, why are we going to change? Why are we causing this change? Why do we want such change? And this is very important. And so I want to ask you all, what do you know about change? Have you ever heard of Michael Fullen or other change agents? Here's a bunch of them: Thousand and Villa, Paolo Freire, Sugata Mitra, Stephen Covey, Kurt Levine, Jean Hall, Shirley Hord, and Mike Schmoker. All of these people have something to do with change theory. And what we're going to look at right now is one of the most important ones, the guru of change theory. And his name is Michael Fullan. He's an international guru of change. He's from Canada, and he's written a lot of books. And I have some. If anybody wants to write to me for email, and you send me your email, I can send you some copies. But basically, one of the prime things that Michael Fullan has said is the route to achieving significant change is this. Da-da-da-da-da-da. Significant change only comes about how? What he says is, don't wait for it to happen. I know, think about that again. The route to achieving a big change is this. Don't wait for it to happen. What he's saying is, if people just sit around and wait and say, well, my director didn't make a change, or well, the Ministry of Education didn't make a change, well, my principal, my director, or my department head didn't make a change, don't wait for change to happen, because it's not going to happen. People don't like to change. They're allergic to change, I think. So what you have to do is you have to be among those promoting and making changes, even if others seem disinterested or negative. This is the problem, because there are resistors. There's people going to resist change. They don't want to make any change. No movements. No, we don't have approval. No, we don't have permission. No, it wasn't done that way. And so what Fullan is saying, Dr. Fullan is saying, be bold, take risks, be a leader, be a change agent, or be a positive deviant. Don't be a deviant. That's not good. But be a positive deviant, that you're going to diverse yourself away from what's traditional and start looking at changes and start looking at how do we teach? How do we teach a language? How do we teach, period? How do we teach anything? And that's what we have to look at. Very important. So change theory by Michael Fullan is teachers need experience building their own professional knowledge. What he talks about is capacity building. All of you that are here today, and I welcome you and I'm glad you're here, all of you that are here today, you are on the road to change because you are doing capacity building. Capacity building is staff development, whether it's in a group or you seek something individually, as all of you have done. Most change theories are weak on capacity building. There's many different change theories out there. There's some excellent ones, which I'm going to show you today, one by Via and Thousand, and of course, Michael Fullan is like the guru of it. But most change theories are weak on capacity building, yet that's the key element of change. Knowledge about change does really matter, and ignore it at your own risk. Because if you're not aware of how people change or how you can get people to change, nothing's going to happen. That's why I've been in education 55 or 60 years. If you want to know, I'm 82, just in case. I know I don't look at how everybody tells me that, but I've been around education for 55 years, and I'm saying the same thing today and yesterday and tomorrow that I said 40 years ago. Most people don't listen. Most people don't want to change, but I have a core of people that work with me and people that I've been friends with for 30 and 40 years, and they are making changes in their jobs. I don't work for anybody, okay? I just work for myself. And so what I see is these wonderful people who are bold, who are brave, who do take a risk, who are deviant, positive deviants, and they make those changes, and they do know about change. And so what Fullan says is this: the key element of change is capacity building. So staff development, teacher meetings, and I don't mean meetings where you go over the agenda and the schedule and all that. I mean small meetings, community meetings, as Dr. Mike Schmoker talks about, is having community-based meetings where you have a small community of teachers that are there for a common reason, and that's to make the school better. And we're not talking about a nice teacher's room or a lounge. We're talking about academically. And so if we're talking about significant change, not just what color you're going to paint the wall, but significant change in the quality. Let's say, for example, in many schools in many countries, students drop out. They don't finish the program, whether it's high school or whether it's university. They just don't finish it. For example, that might be one of the issues. And there's many reasons for that. We find teachers Statistics show that within the first 5 years of teaching, 50% of people leave the teaching career. And most of that is because they feel inadequate, they don't feel supported, they feel threatened, they feel overwhelmed by so much work and paperwork. And so administration and governments and ministries of education and departments of education and schools and governments and editorial companies, they have to cut back on that paperwork, because a teacher is a creative person. If they're not a creative person, they shouldn't be a teacher. So let's look at the 5 things that are necessary to make some kind of change. You have to have vision. You got to see what's not there. You have to have vision. You have to be a visionary. For example, Steve Jobs, from the founder of Apple, he had vision. He could see things that other people couldn't see. The second thing that's essential for change is skills. You have to have people that have skills, and they build those skills by ongoing capacity building, ongoing meetings and courses and webinars. The third thing we need is incentives. You have to incentivize people. You have to have some convincing enticements. Not many people have it inside them. Not many people have intrinsic motivation. It does come, intrinsic motivation does come by external things first, and then you become good at something, and then you feel good about it. Okay, so incentives can be anything from more pay. It could be a special place to park your car. It could be a Friday off. It could be a changed schedule. It could be a director saying, you know what, you've done such a great job and worked so hard that this Friday you can, or this Saturday or this Monday, you can take the day off, and I will come in and teach your classes all day. Just take a day off with pay. Now that's an incentive maybe to do better. So these are the kinds of things you can be creative about. The fourth thing we need is resources, tools and materials. If schools and teachers don't have internet, don't have access to internet, or they have intermittent internet, or they don't have a computer, they're trying to use a phone. It's very difficult using a phone. I have an iPhone, I have an iPad, I have my computer that I'm using right now. But if I didn't have my computer, I wouldn't do much work, because I find that things are very hard to do when they're very small. So we need tools and materials. Materials do not necessarily mean textbooks. Many teachers, excellent teachers, if you give them a theme and give them some ideas, they might not even need those, they can create material. There's lots of material out there for free that can be used, or that don't cost very much. There's lots of things available. Resources are important. And the fifth thing is an action plan. An action plan is something specific. Who's going to do it? When is it going to start? When is it going to end? What results do you want? And it's monitored. Okay, whether you're going to be creating and building a teacher lounge because there's no place for the teachers to relax, to perhaps adding some kind of a creative workspace for students. Those kinds of projects that can improve a school need to be, the people in charge need to be listed. When is it going to start? When is it going to end? Because the biggest thing I see when I go to schools and I work with school principals and I ask them, they all seem to have a mission, and they all have a vision, they have it framed on the wall in their school. Of course, they can't tell me what it is. They have to go look at it. But I ask them, what is your action plan? They don't know. They don't have one. And as you can see in a minute, you'll see what happens when you don't have some of these things. If any one of those 5 is missing, change that you want cannot and will not occur. And that's just the way it is. It's not going to occur. So let's look at a chart that was developed by Thousand and Via about 10 or 15 years ago, but it still is in effect. If you look at this chart, these are the 5 things I just showed you: vision, skills, incentives, resources, and action plan. If you have all 5 of them, change happens. If you're missing a vision, there's going to be confusion in the staff. If you're missing people with skills, you're going to have anxiety. What am I going to do? Too many students are failing. The students are complaining the teacher's not teaching well. If you miss incentives for your staff, whether it's academic staff or the cleaning staff, the maintenance staff, you have to have incentives. And if you don't, you will get resistance. They'll do the least possible thing because there's no incentives for them, whether it's time off or a bonus or a party, something to make them feel wanted and needed. If you're missing resources, then your staff is frustrated, totally frustrated. And if you're missing an action plan, If you don't have a written, this has to be written. It's not just, oh yeah, I think we'll do this. Maybe we'll meet at 4 o'clock. No, you have to have a vision and you have to have all of these things and an action plan in writing. Then you're on a treadmill. If you don't know what a treadmill is, that's okay. I'll give you an example. If you've ever seen those round cages with a little gerbil or little animal, little mouse inside, and they're running and they're running and they're running, and the thing's going around, but they're not getting anywhere. Or people, humans, were on a walk, one of those walking things in an exercise gym, and we're walking and walking. We don't get anywhere. We're just getting some exercise. That's a treadmill. Nothing happens. You don't get anywhere. This is what happens if we don't have all 5 of those things in place. And those are things we can help you with. There are lots of things. Remember, we have a follow-up of this workshop. We have a follow-up on November 9th, and I will be getting into specific things that you can do. Okay, so let's go on and start saying, okay, where are we now? We are over here with, let me get out of this again. I keep getting all these extra things in here. Let me get rid of that, okay. We have capacity building. Are you ready? Are you going to welcome capacity building? Do you want a new destination? Because one's destination is never a place. It's a new way of seeing things. That's something we need to remember. I'm not saying you're going on a trip. You're going on a destination. You're looking for something. For example, childhood. Childhood is not an epic of time. Childhood is a journey. It's not a race. It's a journey. And the same thing with our destination. It's not a place. It's a new way of seeing things. So let's begin to start looking at new things and get out of that box. And how do we look at things differently? I'm going to show you a quotation here, and I'm not going to give you the answer until a minute. I want you to think. I want to know if this is reality or illusion. Here's the statement. Instruction is the #1 factor in student achievement. Think about that for about 30 seconds. I wish I could give you more time, but I don't have a lot. Okay, instruction, what you do, instruction, okay, is the #1 factor in student achievement. It's a reality. That is a reality, okay? And you can see the reality of it because what we have over here is, and I'm going to get up here again, it's a reality, and hundreds of research reports support this, okay? For example, Dr. Harry Wong said, what the teacher does in the classroom is what makes the main difference in student achievement. And he did this based on research. Many times we blame the student's economic level, or we say the student is lazy, or we say the student is not motivated. Motivation comes from inside. You can't motivate anybody. I can't motivate you. All we can do is make the circumstances by which people might become motivated. And that's what the instruction is. How do you teach? You use visuals, or is it just blah, 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 blah? Most learning specialists and psychologists tell us that most humans learn visually. Okay, and that's what we have to start looking at. We look at it visually, and that's very, very important. So we have to promote change. We have to work on this, start looking at it. And so what we have here is all kinds of beliefs out there. We have a lot of different myths about being multilingual. One of the myths, of course, is that good teachers need to be native speakers. That's not true. I know lots of native speakers who are teachers, but they're not good teachers because they don't know how to teach. They're boring. They're based on the textbook. They go through all kinds of grammar exercises, which turn students off. Grammar is how a language is organized and how it works. Think logically. When you learned your first language, whatever it may be, whether it's Arabic or Romanian or English or Chinese, whatever language you learned was your native language, you didn't start out by learning grammar. You start out by having people talk to you and you listened, and gradually you increased your vocabulary. Once you are already expert at your native language, then the vocabulary becomes easy because it's just having in your head, for example, a picture of an elephant. You might say elefante in the language that's your native language, but in English it's elephant. So those kinds of things don't depend on a native speaker. They depend on good teaching techniques. The second myth is that students first have to learn their first language. That's also not true. I know many people, including my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren, who learn 2 languages simultaneously, depending on where they lived and who was around them. The third thing, grammar is most important. No, it's not. I already pointed that out. Grammar is important once you're able to speak and have some conversations. What if you don't? It doesn't do any good to know present, past, past participle. All those kinds of things are useless, and it turns people off on learning a language. Grammar is important after they speak it. Another one is young children will be confused. Absolutely not. I know many kids. I personally know them, and of course, research shows also young children, 3, 4 years old, respond to some of them to 3 languages. Maybe grandma speaks Russian, and then grandpa speaks French, and the mother speaks English. That child is going to grow up speaking 3 languages. Number 5, many teachers think that you have to be able to translate the first language to the second and the second back to the first. No. Translation, if you look at Bloom's taxonomy and the levels of competency and the levels of cognitive thinking, translation is one of the lowest levels of cognitive thought. Translation is not necessary. In fact, when you teach kids translation or teach students translation, they don't start thinking in their native language or their language that they're trying to acquire. They just don't think. They try to mix them all up. They try to translate in their brain. I learned Spanish when I was 43 years old. It's a long story why, I'm not going to tell you, but I learned when I was 43 by a total immersion program for 6 weeks. And when I speak Spanish, which I do quite fluently and quite often because I work a lot in Latin American countries. In fact, I just came back from 6 months in Paraguay. When I speak Spanish, I'm thinking in Spanish. I'm not translating from English to Spanish. So we have to realize that teaching translation actually retards the growth of students. Another one is very difficult to be bilingual. Not at all. Most of you are, and most of the world is basically. And the other one is adults can't learn a second or third language. That's also not true. I know my friend Stephen Krashen is teaching himself like 5 languages at the same time just by reading them and listening. I learned Spanish when I was 43. Of course, I lived in Mexico for a while, so it was easier to learn when you're actually there. But I didn't study the grammar. I have never studied the grammar, but I can talk 5 hours in Spanish without knowing grammar because I picked it up. I'll say things like me gustaría, which is subjunctive case, but nobody taught me that. I just hear people saying it. Okay. The thing is, in the 21st century, if you don't speak the language, you don't really know it. In the old days being when I was a kid and beyond me, when in the old days, what we thought was students had to be able to read in a foreign language and write in a foreign language and translate. But now what we're seeing in the 21st century is oral production is super important. When you go for a job interview, if you're going into a job interview in Germany, you have to speak German. Usually, they require that language as well as English. So these are the kinds of things we have to realize that times are changing. And so I'm going to give you 2 different things about learning language when you're teaching, whether they're adults or children. This is Learning Languages Part 1, which I will hopefully be able to get here because sometimes time remaining on development of basic language skills, the listening, speaking, reading, and writing. You need to hear a word before you can say it. Okay? This is not for people who already know a language. This is learning a language initially. The second thing, you need to say a word before you can read it. For example, I was able to say the word corral, where you keep horses or cows, because I had a horse and it was in a corral. So when I read it, oh, I knew what that word was, corral. And I remember when I was in 2nd grade and the teacher said to me, "How did you know that word? I haven't taught it yet." I said, "I don't know." I had no idea how I knew the word, but I knew what corral meant. And so when I saw the word, it made sense. Plus, there was a picture on the page of a little pony inside a corral. Number 3, you need to read a word before you can write it. So these are this is how a human brain works in learning a language. And we have to look at that. And part 2 is very, very important. How do we learn a language? We learn a language by listening and reading. Silent reading, not reading out loud, because that's just checking pronunciation. We're talking about reading out loud. We actually learn a new vocabulary and acquire new language, such as grammatical structures, by reading. When we speak and write, we only exhibit skills we already know. In other words, when you say something, You can't say a word that you've never heard before, you don't know. You can't write something that's not in your brain anyway. So speaking and writing are not adequate to teach a language. You can do it for practice, but that's not how students learn. And yet, how do we teach? What do we concentrate on in school? Many times, writing and speaking. So what I'm going to ask you to do is familiarize yourself with Dr. Krashen's optimal input. Optimal output. Dr. Krashen is on, you can find him on Facebook, you can find him in a lot of places, but I think that if you look up on YouTube, you can find him actually explaining, basically, this is what he says. We learn a language, learn it by listening to others who speak it and by reading, silent reading, whether it's a newspaper or a magazine. And when we speak and write, which are also important skills, we're only practicing what we already know. What's led to the development of this high expectations? Well, two things: the Common European Framework of Reference and CLIL. And some of you might know that, some of you might not. So I'm going to just do a brief explanation of this. What is the Common European Framework of Reference? It's the full title is the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages, Learning, Teaching, Assessment. And this is what the book looks like. Well, there's other books too, but this book is about 265 pages long. And you can get it by Cambridge University Press, I guess. That's where I got mine. And what it is, it's fat book. It's like I said, 265 pages. And what does it tell us about CLIL? What it shows us is a variety of things that CLIL is. And it gives us the levels. This is one of the things that shows us that this is an acquisition level. A1 is not where you start at a language. A1 is a level you actually reach. It's a basic language user, somebody who can use the language basically, like, hello, how are you? Where do you live? How old are you? What's your telephone number? That kind of thing. These are all levels that are reached. They're levels of acquisition. Now, the Common European Framework, that book that I showed you, is not just about those 6 levels. Its objectives support several things: language programs, they identify text levels. All of the text, at least in Europe and the European Union, all of the textbooks are supposed to be identified by A1, from those levels from A1 to C2. Cultural context. There's expectations and criteria for each level. Also, the 6 levels are defined. They explain, for example, A1 is what I just explained to you. C2 is defined as almost like a native speaker, or even as a native speaker, and an accent is acceptable. You don't have to speak as I do. I have one accent. There's many accents in the United States. My accent is from the Northeast United States, because that's where I lived most of my life, well, half of my life. Also, we're pushing the idea that we have to continue lifelong language learning. We're always still learning a language. I'm still learning things in English, and I've been speaking English for about 82 years. Okay, we have to remember that marks, grades, this is something that many schools are opposed to, but you have to think about it logically. What the Common European Framework says is marks or grades are irrelevant in language. Sort of like basketball. You don't grade somebody in basketball. Did they make baskets? Or in football, they don't get a grade in football. Did they make any touchdowns? Did they help prevent somebody else from getting a touchdown? And so what it is what we're talking about is language isn't grades, learning a language. For example, let's say that you teach science. I taught science. I taught 2nd grade starting out, but later on I went to much older grade levels in subject matter. I taught biology, chemistry, and physics to middle school kids, and in English. They were all immigrant kids, and in the United States. And when I taught them, I graded them on the answers or the work or the creation or the things that they invented or experiments they did on the subject. I taught physics, chemistry, biology, and earth science, and that's what they got graded on. They didn't get graded on their English, but their English grew from the beginning of the year when it was measured in a test to the end of the year. They grew drastically and positively. And we're proud of that, because they came in maybe speaking hesitantly, and they went out speaking confidently. Okay. Also, that book, that blue covered book I showed you, tells how they investigate how people actually learn language effectively. And this led to CLIL. So what's CLIL? Stands for content and language. I put a comma there because some people say content and language integrated learning. They have no idea what it means. Content and language, comma, integrated learning. So we have the content taught in the language. So that when I was teaching science in English to immigrants, the kids were learning language and content. What CLIL is. Okay, so there's a lot of things that CLIL supports, but we have to look at CLIL as a philosophy. It's a philosophy of, it's not a method, it's not a program. Some schools say, oh, we have a CLIL program, we have a CLIL method. It's not a method or a program. Basically, it's a philosophy. It's a philosophy of how people teach well, how humans learn, and how people learn well. So CLIL includes that the language is integrated into a broad general curriculum. It doesn't just depend on a specific text or a program or a project. It's a philosophy of how we best learn language. It's a broad, complete curriculum in the second language or third language. It includes content areas like math, science, history, music, art. Errors are a natural part of learning. Fix them. No failures in language study. So if I have a student and I give them a vocabulary test, my vocabulary tests are never multiple choice. Multiple choice, I call it multiple moron because it's very, very sad because they can just guess and I don't know if they really know it. My vocabulary tests are always the same. Here's the word, define it or illustrate it. So if one of my words on the vocabulary is DNA, they could write deoxyribonucleic acid. I would accept it. If they write DNA is why my grandfather and I both have blue eyes, I would accept it. If they draw me a picture of a double helix, which I showed them in class, I would accept it. Vocabulary is something, it's a concept in your brain. It's not something you can verbally describe nor memorize from the dictionary. In fact, I don't even use dictionaries in my class except to look up a word we might not know. Usually we try to figure them out in context. Okay? Oral fluency is emphasized, not grammar rules. Teaching context and by example. So if I remember a little boy said to me, he was about 10 years old, and I had called him up and I had left Maine, another state, and I came here to Texas. And when I called him up, he said, hey, where did you went? I said, oh, you mean, where did I go? And he said, yeah, where did you go? That's how you correct grammar. And they say it the right way the next time. How long does it take? This is a big issue with schools and universities. How long does it take to reach various English levels? Of course, it depends on how much time they're exposed to English or German or Russian or Arabic or any language you're trying to teach. So quality, it depends on the amount of class, it depends on the amount of exposure in and out of class, as well as the quality of the teacher and his or her techniques. So let's look at this and see. This is the Common European Framework of Reference. I'm going to show you a chart. These are the 6 levels, and these are approximately how many hours of high quality exposure to the language. It can be in a class, it can be with a teacher, it can be living in a country, it can be listening to things, practicing. To get to reach A1 level, you need approximately 200 hours. Now, I didn't create this. This was originally some of the ministries of education I've worked with have come up with these kinds of rules because they have to set time for school. If you want to get to professional native like the C2, you need about 1,300 hours. Now let's look and see what that translates to in a school. In a school, for example, if this is the same thing, it just played it again. Sorry, let me go back again. Try to change this. I'm having a little bit of issue here with some of these things trying to change, but I will get to it. Okay, here's the next one. So now these are the levels reached. If the kids have only 90 hours a year, that means they get about 45 minutes 3 times a week. They don't get to A1 level until 3rd or 4th grade. They don't get, you can't do much with A1. In fact, most countries have minimally to be a teacher, minimally, some have higher, like Spain has C1, but minimally B2. And that gets them to 12th grade if you're lucky. The problem is that many countries don't even have people at a B2 level, so they have to go down to B1, which means the quality of teaching isn't that great. There might be good techniques, but if the teacher doesn't speak very well, they have to make sure they bring in guest speakers and use a lot of videos and recordings. If, however, a school has a program where the kids have a strong English program, if you're talking about English, and 10 to 15 hours a week, 400 hours a year, then by the end of second grade, kids get to A1. And by the end of middle school here, they're already up at a B2, which is excellent because they're independent learners. So these are the things, the time you spend make a big difference. And speaking of time, how do you spend your time? Many teachers say, I don't have time to do that. I don't know, she's talking about doing this and doing that. I don't have time. And that's what they say to me all the time. I'll say, did you finish your project with the kids last month? No, we didn't have time. I decided not to even do it. And I say to the teachers this, I tell them, we all have the same 24 hours in a day. Everything depends on priority. What are you going to prioritize? That's what you have to think about. Where are you placing your priorities? So time research, time management research, I'm going to show you two things from time management. First, there's three kinds of time in the classroom. There's the allocated time, like let's say you have a class that's 1 hour, that's allocated time. Engaged time, if you're doing something but not teaching, maybe you're picking up homework papers, or maybe you're having the kids hang up their coats or put their backpack somewhere. And then there's something called ALT, academic learning time. This is when the students and the teacher are on task. They're doing something, whether it's reading or writing or discussing or finishing something up or showing a PowerPoint, something, they're doing something they're involved in. This is academic learning time. Okay, those are the three kinds of time. Now, my question is this. I'm going to show you the time here. On task means when kids and teacher are actively involved in learning activities. ALT, being on task. Okay, that's when the kids and the teachers are actively involved in the learning process. Engaged time, students are doing something, but not academic work. Maybe they're passing out papers or cleaning their desks or organizing backpacks. Those things happen. In a 1 hour class, this is my question to you. I'm going to have you think about it for about 30 seconds. In a 1 hour class, what % of the class should be academic learning time? In a 1 hour class, what do you think? What %? Okay, I gave you time to think. Almost invariably, when I've done this in a personalized course, the people definitely, absolutely underestimate how much time they're supposed to spend on academic learning time. What research says is that 90% of your class time should be on task. And what does that mean? Well, it means something. It means something very important. As soon as we get into this, is the 90%, the students on task, 100% of your time is allocated, 10% engaged, doing something, but not academic, 90% on task. And so what does that mean is that the kids are learning more. The more academic time you spend, like in a 60-minute class, you should have about 54 minutes of academic learning time and about 6 minutes maximum in engaged time. Important. More ALT means more student learning. And you can use sponge activities to promote learning. They're just little activities and games. Maybe you've got 10 minutes left, and some teachers might say, okay, there's only 10 minutes, you gotta get free time. No. When my students used to ask me for free time at the beginning, before they knew me, like in middle school, little kids didn't do this, but the middle school kids would say, hey, teacher, can we have some free time on Friday? I said, look, I don't work for free, and you don't get free time. Everybody's gonna work here. And they would laugh, and they knew it was a joke, and I never gave free time, never. I taught 90 minutes, 3 days a week to different groups of kids. I had some groups Tuesday, Thursday, and the next Monday, and I had other kids Monday, Wednesday, Friday, on another week. So we worked 90 minutes. We definitely got to our 90%. Okay, so sponge activities are fun things to do, and it makes the class more interesting, but they're learning. Student success occurs when they have the maximum number of minutes in instruction and learning, because the idea is we have to keep time on task. And one more thing on time management, we have to learn how to work smarter, not harder. Another thing, Stephen Covey, he's another researcher on time management, and he gave 4 descriptions of things we do that affect our time. This is a book he wrote. His son is following in his footsteps now since he died. Everything we do is either urgent or not urgent, and important or not important. There's nothing else we do in life that doesn't have one of those 4 things. Agreed? Can you think of anything else? I can't either. Okay, so let's look and see how he organized this, how Dr. Covey organized this. Urgent, not urgent, important, not important. And then he drew a graph like this. So if you're in zone 1, you're doing things that are urgent and important. If you're in zone 2, you're doing things that are not urgent, but they are important. If you're in zone 3, you're doing things that are urgent and not important. And if you're in zone 4, you're doing things that are not urgent and they're not important either. So let's look at that and see, what does that mean when we talk about activities? So I'll show you some activities that qualify in those. And urgent and important are things like, unfortunately, waste time. There's no plans. They're putting out fires. Maybe some kid broke his leg on the playground and you have to get them to the hospital. Everything's an emergency, serious panic. And the result is stress. When you do things at the last minute, even though they're very important, but you wait till the last minute, you get stressful. If you do things down here that are urgent but not important, maybe somebody calls you and the secretary says, you have to call back Mrs. Brown right now. She wants to call right. No, maybe not even important. Maybe she wants to tell you that tomorrow she's going to send cupcakes to school. The results with these kinds of interruptions and plans with no follow through is short-term focus and no growth. Over here, things that are not urgent and not important. Well, this could result in a job loss. It's like playing video games on the computer when you're supposed to be teaching. Or I've walked into classrooms when I've been observing teachers. I've actually found teachers, texting on their phone, and they're texting messages, and they've got the kids copying something off the board or out of a book. And the one I have in blue here, things that are not urgent, but they're important. This is when people visualize the future. They have plans, they delegate things, they organize, they build relationships, they know what's happening, they have time for their family, and the result is success and happiness. So where we're supposed to spend our time is areas that are not urgent, but that are important. And that's very, very, very important, because we have to be in the blue zone 90% of the time. Maybe you have some things that happen over here. I hope you never go in here, okay? These are where lazy people go. Sometimes they get fired, sometimes they don't. Okay, so we're saying to ourselves right now, okay, get back in the box and start thinking like the rest of us. They asked for that. They asked for us to get back in the box, get back in there, but look what happens. Get back in the box, and he says, I'm not going to get in that box. I don't even want to get in that box. I don't plan to get in a box. And so you have to say, which box is yours? And hopefully teachers and administrators and anybody else who's in the audience, there's no need to think outside the box. Why? There is no box. You make the box yourself. So don't make a box. Don't be afraid to fail. Be afraid not to try. You've got to try some of these things we're talking about so that we can make sure that we're going to be ending up where we want to be. We want to make sure that we are doing these things so that we become excellent educators. I'm going to give you some personal tasks that you can do after this webinar is done. I'm not going to collect it. You can write to me. I'll give you my email again at the end. But basically, I want to know what's inside your box. What keeps you inside from doing all the things you wish you could do? Make a list just for yourself on a piece of paper. You don't have to write it to me, but if you want to, you're welcome. Make a list of ideas and beliefs and fears and experiences that keep you inside a box. Sometimes include possible reasons why you're not changing or updating your style or updating your beliefs or expectations or your techniques. Make a list of things you could change and how that might be possible. That's what you've got to realize, that dreams do happen. It's okay to dream. Sometimes dreams do come true. And we have to realize that what is inside in your box, if you have a box, or maybe you don't have a box, maybe you're way down here. Tell about the things you could do. And even if you don't share this with me or anyone else, if you do it for yourself, your brain will start developing. You'll start being more cognizant of what's happening out there in the world. And I think that's super important for you to do that. That's your personal task. This is Paulo Freire, a famous educator. And what he said is very meaningful, because he said education won't change the world. Okay, we all know that. Education changes people who will change the world. And I think that's what we have to remember. Why are we in education? Why are we teachers anyway? because we want to form people who will get out there and change the world. The world needs change right now. There's a lot of things needed, and we can be those positive deviants and get out there and make positive changes. I hope all of you can recognize that, because it's something that's very important that we do it to make these changes in our world. Okay, let's go on. And I'm going to finish up with some things here from all of our background of what we've been doing. So don't be afraid to try. Don't be afraid to fail. Be afraid not to try. And so I'm going to give you my email again. I'm not done yet, so don't run away. Don't run away. I have a few more slides to show you. Our challenge is to get out of the box and to stay out of the box. And our next workshop, our next webinar scheduled for November 7th, is, I think it's the 7th, yes. Our next one, 7th or the 9th, our next one is to find out about how we stay out of the box and stay out of the box. And this is my email, icselaineg@gmail.com. If you want to write to me, I'll take a minute and write that down. And I'll give you a minute right now, or take a picture of this. We're going to stay out of the box and find out how. How do we stay out of a box? I want to thank everybody in a variety of languages I have here. I hope I reached your language. If not, let me know so I can add it to my list of growing list of thank yous. I want you to check out the website of Authentic Solutions. They're the ones that sponsored this today. And I want you to realize that part 2, Beyond the Box, is going to be, yes, the 9th. I was right. The 7th is my sister's birthday. That's why that date stuck on my mind. She's going to be 75. Okay. She's younger than I am. Obviously, if I'm 82. Saturday, November 9th at same time. You can register now. You can register anytime. The registration is possible as soon as you can, so that we can see if we can get some people to come today. And I'm going to give you the survey. This is a survey that you have here from Authentic Solutions. And what I'm going to ask you to do, please, is take a picture of this. I'm going to give you like 2 minutes. I'm going to be quiet for 2 minutes. Let me get to my phone so I can look at my clock. I'm giving you 2 minutes so that you can work on the survey and scan that. I thank you, and I hope that I'll see you all re-registered to participate in our next one, which is the last one. It's 2 courses going together. And I'm here in Texas. If anybody wants to write, I'm welcome. I always answer my email. Okay, thank you very much for giving up your time today. And I hope that you learned something new, or at least that I inspired you to get out there and start looking at things. Thank you so much.